Hello, I'm James Westbury, and welcome to our special report revisiting the infamous Cuban Missile Crisis on the 45th anniversary. Today we will be watching ABC News clips from the event, which includes footage, interview, and analysis of the event itself. Let's go back to first news of the event in early 1962.
Good evening, Australia, and welcome to ABC News. Tonight, our top story is a development in Russia, where our roving reporter Angus McNamara has infiltrated the Russian government. We'll cross live to Angus now. Angus, first and foremost, what are those rascally Russians up to?
Well, after spending a considerable amount of time infiltrating the presidential office here, and through very difficult detective work, we were able to figure out that the Russians have planted missiles in Cuba. Here is the footage we were able to film whilst we were in the president's office during an important meeting between Mr. Castro, the Cuban leader, and Mr. Khrushchev, the Russian leader.
Mr. Khrushchev, I'm very happy that we're here to negotiate the defense against the common enemy today.
Yes, being able to give both our countries a proper defense against the USA is of the utmost importance and should not be taken lightly.
So what do you think we should do?
I propose we plant a number of missiles in Cuba. This will ensure that the Americans would not only be unable to invade Cuba, it would also give the Soviets powerful first strike capability that would be able to counteract the American strike on Turkey and France.
This sounds like a very well thought out plan. When will the missiles arrive and when will we begin construction?
Both the arrival and construction will commence later this summer.
So you've told me, and I see your plan. We will deploy Soviet missiles in Cuba to ensure the safety of the Cuban people and the Soviet Union's first strike capability. I look forward to working with you in the near future.
As do I.
I'm afraid that's all the time we've got for now. But stay tuned, as we will be providing a special marathon coverage of this crisis and make sure you're informed every step of the way. But for now, I'm Dick Johnson. See you next time, Australia.
On October 15, 1962, the US President was notified of these missiles and immediate action was taken. We will now take a look at our coverage and inside footage of this meeting.
Hello, Australia, and welcome back to our marathon coverage of the Cuban Missile Crisis. In breaking news, we have heard that the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, has just been alerted to the presence of these missiles in Cuba. Here to tell us more is our undercover White House correspondent, Tom Brown. Now, Tom, I believe you have some special footage for us.
Yes, hello, Dick. Me and my team in the White House has been deep undercover for the past year. The President has been alerted to these missiles by a spy plane flying over Cuba. Here is the footage that we were able to produce from the President's emergency bunker.
You sir, take a seat.
Mr. President, as you can see in these photos taken over Cuba yesterday from one of our M2 planes, it appears that the Soviet Union has planted missiles on Cuban soil and has allied themselves with Cuba in order to mount a very dangerous first strike capability.
Do we know that they're Soviet missiles?
Yeah, we had one of our Soviet moles identified for us.
Alright, what are our options here?
So the way we see it, we have 6 options. Number 1 is we do nothing. American vulnerability to Soviet missiles is not new. Number 2, use diplomatic pressure to get the Soviet Union to remove the missiles. Number 3, offer Castro the choice of splitting with the Russians or be invaded. Number 4, full force invasion of Cuba and overthrow Castro. Number 5, use the US Air Force to attack all known missile sites. And number 6, use the US Navy to block any supplies arriving in Cuba.
Like a blockade.
Exactly. We believe that is the best option. However, there might be an airstrike or a full-scale invasion to completely minimize the risk, and it would probably come without Soviet retaliation.
If we did that, then the Soviets would have a clear line to conquer Berlin. I'm sorry, that's out of the question. I can't give up Berlin, nor can we let ourselves be seen as trigger-happy cowboys.
Are we sure that this will affect the balance of power? I mean, it's just 340 Soviet missiles compared to our 5,000.
I promised the American people a month ago, this event, that if Cuba acquired offensive weapons, that we would act. Also, our allies and citizens would see this as a US credibility being damaged, and image contributes towards reality.
Whatever the case, we need to make a decision and start acting on it, because every second we sit, and weight is a second we could be using much more effectively.
Well, despite that abrupt ending, I'd say that is a big development in this crisis. That's all we've got time for tonight, but stay tuned as we will return with exclusive coverage on the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm Dick Johnson. See you next time, Australia.
At this point, President Kennedy had spent days bunking down with his advisors on what to do about the crisis. However, on October 22 at 3 p.m, the public was finally given some light on this matter and how the United States would deal with it.
Hello, Australia, and welcome back to our special coverage of the unfolding event now being called the Cuban Missile Crisis. Now, according to our sources, President Kennedy has been in more discussions with his special ex-com board and has even met with the Soviet Minister with Foreign Affairs, which we believe he was given inconclusive answers about the missiles. In just a few moments, however, President Kennedy will make a public statement addressing the crisis and probably his plan of attack. Let's cross live to the White House now.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere. Acting, therefore, in the defense of our own security and of the entire Western Hemisphere, and under the authority entrusted to me by the Constitution, as endorsed by the resolution of the Congress, I have directed that the following initial steps be taken immediately. First, to halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, where they're found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back. This quarantine will be extended, if needed, to other types of cargo and carriers. We are not at this time, however, denying the necessities of life, as the Soviets attempted to do in their Berlin blockade of 1948.
Well, there you have it. We are going to create a blockade of US Navy ships between Cuba and Soviet ships. No, I'm sorry, a quarantine. Time will only tell how both the public and the world will react to this news. Well, that's all the time that we have again. Stay tuned as we continue our marathon coverage of the crisis. From all of us here at ABC News, I've been Dick Johnson. See you next time, Australia.
3 days after JFK's speech addressing the crisis, the blockade was challenged by a number of ships. Despite the lack of danger from these ships, tension was running high, and the President was considering radical options.
Welcome back to our extensive coverage on the Cuban Missile Crisis. Today, the big news is that 2 ships have been allowed through the blockade. One is called the Bucharest, and the other the Maracula. Apparently, they didn't pose a threat. We have also received news, however, that the Soviet Union has turned back 14 ships that we believe carried offensive weapons in light of the blockade. Joining me now is our White House correspondent, Tom Brown. Now, Tom, what was your reaction from POTUS? And what is your expert analysis on the event?
Well, the President was not very happy, and it seems that he's become increasingly worried about the situation at hand. The Soviet Union has yet to surrender the missiles, and he is starting to put pieces together and mount an invasion. However, he has decided he will wait, and he believes that diplomacy is the best option until we're faced with another opinion.
Hello, and welcome back to our coverage of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, we have good news. The crisis is finally over. After receiving a letter a few days ago from Premier Khrushchev of the Soviet Union, President Kennedy has in his letter of response agreed to the terms that America will withdraw its 15 Jupiter missiles from Turkey, and in return, the Soviets will withdraw their missiles from Cuba, and have promised that we will not invade Cuba anytime soon. Thank you, and for the final time, this has been Dick Johnson for ABC News.